Great. All right. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Sumaiya Zama. Many of you, of course, know me. However, I've been on a couple of the previous calls, and I'm noticing there's a lot of people coming on from like different parts of the state, not just the Sharon community, which is really exciting. But yeah, welcome. If you're not part of the Sharon community and you don't know who I am, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I'm gonna leave all my contact information if you have any like follow-up questions or anything. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Sumaiya Zama.
So yeah, like I said, my name is Sumaiya Zama.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. A formal introduction, but before we jump sort of right into what it is I'm going to talk about today, I just wanted to take a minute to do a quick breathing exercise. So, at noon during the session about mental health, which was amazing, I noticed that someone had asked about breathing exercises, and just wanted to start with that before we really jumped in. So if I could get everyone to, I can't see who's here, but just in front of your computer or wherever you are, to just be very still and calm. And if you can, close your eyes. And I'm going to count to 3. And if we can all breathe in for 3, hold it, and breathe out for 4. All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Breathe in for 3. 3, 2, 1. Hold it. Breathe out for 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. One more time. Breathe in for 3. 3, 2, 1. Hold it. And breathe out for 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. One more. Breathe in for 3. 3, 2, 1. And hold it. Breathe out for 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. So I hope that was helpful for people. I know, the quarantine has caused a lot of anxiety. I know for myself, for people that I know, for my friends, my family. I mean, it's a really, really crazy time, and I don't like to sort of sugarcoat that. I know it's difficult, and what we're about to talk about is a little bit difficult. So I just wanted to make sure that I was creating the space for people to sort of unpack a lot of that and maybe like allow ourselves to breathe a little bit easy, inshallah. All right. I wanted to make this as interactive as possible. That's incredibly difficult to do over Zoom, but I'd just like folks to, chime in whenever they want to. Feel free to ask a question or leave a comment on how you feel about any sort of thing or even suggestions, and we'll go from there, inshallah. All right. I'm just going to offer folks to say their name, their favorite quarantine snacks, and how they're feeling right now. So if you want to go ahead in the chat box, I'll give an example. So my name is Sumaiya. My favorite quarantine snack is, I've been drinking this TikTok coffee, so I'm going to say that. And I'm feeling great. So I'm going to enter that into the chat, and if folks can just continue to do that while I talk, that would be great, just so I have a feel for who's around, and we can make this as interactive as we want to. Awesome. So again, moving into who I am, what I do. My name is Sumaiya Zama. I'm the Director of Community Advocacy and Education at the Massachusetts chapter of CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. We're the largest civil rights advocacy organization for Muslims in the United States, and my work in particular is with young Muslims and the Muslim community in general. And so what does that look like? What does the protection of civil rights look like? What does caring about society look like in the middle of a quarantine and sort of this coronavirus that is like impacting all of us? That's something that I've been thinking a lot about. We're in quarantine. We are being mindful of social distancing. Hopefully, many of us are. I'm actually very proud of the Muslim community for continuing to do that. But alhamdulillah, like we have been so good about caring for each other, not getting each other sick, remaining at home for as long as we need to be. But there are some folks in society who are not immune compromised or might also be immune compromised, but folks who are not immune compromised, folks who are not elderly, that we should also be thinking a lot about. And so I'm sort of going to divide my talk into 3 groups of people that have been adversely impacted by coronavirus and by the quarantine. Perhaps folks that we don't typically think about or aren't thinking about in this moment. And so just want to like reorient ourselves, redraw ourselves to who those folks could be. And so the first group of people that I'd like to talk about is the Asian American community. A huge chunk of us Muslims who are also Asian identifying. Sorry, gonna mute this. Okay. A huge chunk of us are Asian American identifying. Many of us are not East Asian. Many of us tend to be South Asian. But however, many Muslims are East Asian identifying. And so, you know, the really obvious one right now has been, you know, what is the impact on the Asian American community? I'm going to start off with a little tidbit. I'm sure you guys can all relate. You know, when coronavirus stuff first started breaking out, I noticed, you know, my family and my friends and folks that I knew getting a lot of WhatsApp forwards. I'm sure like younger people can relate. Maybe your parents were getting WhatsApp forwards about Asian Americans and about how, you know, this is a virus that started in China and, you know, this is something we should be careful about. And there were all these like weird like theories about why it started in China and what any of this has to do with Chinese Americans. And, you know, there was a lot of blame going around that I noticed. And I think, you know, that was something that I became sensitive about, that I felt like, okay, you know, like as Muslims, we do not like when we are stereotyped. You know, we feel like we are blamed for a lot of things that are not our fault. And, you know, a lot of it goes around every time there's a school shooting. We're like, you know, if this person was Muslim, they'd call it a terrorist act. And, you know, whenever we do something, it's called terrorism. You know, this is a really valid concern that a lot of Muslims have. And, you know, we don't like to be grouped up as like one sort of group of people. And so I had immediate concerns because I was like, you know, this is something that we care about. You know, as a civil rights organization, we care about combating stereotypes. We care about fighting for the rights of our brothers and sisters in Islam. And so what does that mean when we as Muslims are placing the blame on something that is, it's going to impact all of us, right? Like it's spread all over the world. In every country of the world, you know, there's reported cases. And so it's impacting the Asian American community. And so how are we sort of monitoring our social interactions with the Asian community? I have a friend who works for an Asian American organization, and he has said that their hate crimes have spiked, you know, unfortunately. And so that's something we want to be intentional about. We want to be thinking about. When hate crimes spiked in the Muslim community after the 2016 election, that was something that, you know, us as CARE, we were thinking deeply about, you know, in response to 9/11, in response to the election, in response to anything that happens. We feel very cautious about the well-being of our loved ones and our friends and our families. And so, you know, it's something that I want to draw attention to. I want us to have open conversations about things like that. And I think there is a way to talk about the virus and, you know, the origins of the virus or whatever you want to call it without being xenophobic. And so that is something that I'm thinking a lot about. Okay, I'm just reading through the comments. Favorite snack is Kit Kat. Favorite snack is pineapples. Dates. Okay, we have a sunnah food in there. Dates and tea. Okay, awesome. Shout out to the people who shared. If you didn't share, it's totally fine. I just was curious. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and then moving forward, I think the defense around Asian Americans also comes in when we think a lot about who we are supposed to be protecting and what our religion calls on us to do in the face of like ethnic diversity. One of the things I love the most about the Sharon Masjid is the ayat that is written across the front door. We have divided you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. That is something that is it's at the heart of this community in particular. And so I want to make sure that we're checking each other and we're reminding each other that this is not only just like a liberal talking point or like a woke kind of take. No, this is like what Islam calls on us to do. It calls on us to recognize our diversity and to respect that and to not place blame for something that really can happen to any ethnic group, right? This is a virus. I mean, and it has originated from different parts of the world. But at the end of the day, like, we are Bani Adam, like we are children of Adam and we are in this together, So that's something I want us to think about. The second sort of group of people that I want us to draw our attention to are incarcerated folks. And that means folks who are in prison, folks who are in jail, people who are packed in tight vicinities. I think this is an issue we don't talk about at all, is decarceration. So trying to come to a place in society where there are less people who are locked up in jail and in prison. And as Muslims, but particularly as American Muslims, this is something that we should be caring a lot about. The scale of incarceration, the scale in which Americans are locked up is the highest out of any country in the world. And not by 2 or 3 times, but by a lot. I encourage you guys to look into this issue. I encourage you guys to look into why that is, what the origins of that are. I think that's a whole different talk. And inshallah, if we have time, like, I can answer some of those questions about that. But there's a lot of people who are wrongfully convicted. There's a lot of people who are locked up for no real reasons, who are very much at risk for catching coronavirus, right? So if you can imagine the way our prisons and our jails are set up, there are people who are very much in close proximity to each other. And you might say, well, none of them are leaving the jail. How are they going to get it? Once there's a guard there or anyone who works there that gets it, like, it's pretty much over for the entire population. I encourage you guys to look into what's happening at Rikers. I mean, that's like a prison that has a very bad history of being very abusive to folks who are locked up. And so there are a growing number of cases happening, and it's going to become like wildfire. So I want us to be thinking about that as well. Also, feel free to ask any questions if you guys have any, or if I'm talking too fast. I'd love to give clarification or talk more about these issues because they are very heavy. And the third sort of group of people I want to talk about is folks who are homeless, folks who do not have a home. Boston has one of the highest rates of homelessness in the country. I'm thinking a lot about people who cannot socially distance. Like, there are literally people who do not have that option. Like, their space in which they live is shared with other people. And so if you are tuning into this from your own home, just for a moment, send a prayer to those who do not have that. Take a moment to sit in that gratitude, because it really is a blessing, in a lot of ways. And so I know we're running short on time. I think I have like 20 more minutes or 25 more minutes. I wanted to like shift to a Q&A and make time for that. So I'll just move through a little bit quickly. And so what are the 4 things that we can sort of be doing right now that we're in quarantine? I was listening to Imam Abdul Rahman yesterday, and he talked about how this quarantine is kind of like our own itikaf. Like, the last 10 days of Ramadan when you are in itikaf and you're really, deeply immersed in prayer and thought and gratitude and just worship. In a lot of ways, what we're experiencing now is like a mandatory itikaf where we're all in this together and we're all sort of in a state of trying to figure out who we want to be at the end of this. And so the 2 sort of questions that I'm posing to folks is, 1, who do you want to be after this quarantine? What are the things that you can do now to become that person at the end of the quarantine? The second thing that I encourage folks to think about is, what is the society that you would like to see post-quarantine, right? What kind of society do you imagine seeing, after that, all of that? And so we can begin the work that needs to be done on those 2 fronts, both the individual and the society. We can do that work now while we are given this time, right? There are no distractions. There's, work from home, school from home. And so the 4 things that I encourage folks to do, the first one, make dua. Pray, make dua for people who have less. Make dua for folks who, are Asian American, who both have to deal with the fact that this illness could touch their lives just like any one of us, and also have to deal with the fact that they might experience a hate crime. Prayers are always, something that you want to be thinking a lot about. That is the most powerful thing that you can do. Praying for incarcerated folks, and praying for folks who are homeless. And so just to dive a little bit into that portion, we always say, you should make dua, you should pray. It seems like a common sense sort of thing. One thing I've been working a lot on is being intentional about writing down those prayers. So I have a journal with all of my duas in them. Whenever anyone says, make dua for me, I make a point to write them down. I make a point to write down the name of the person, what specifically I am asking for, and crafting the language around that dua in a very intentional way. We know that Allah loves when we are very mindful and ask in a very beautiful way. And so I have some examples I wrote down of that. If you are making dua for folks who are incarcerated, saying Ya Allah, only you can grant freedom to those who are not free. Only you can do that. Ya Allah, please free all of the wrongfully imprisoned people in the world, right? So making sure that you are asking for that very specifically. I encourage you all to do that. The second thing that I encourage folks to do is to center the most oppressed people in your conversations. I notice I'm sitting with my parents a lot now. We're all sitting together for dinner. We don't really have an option. It's not like you can be yeah, I'm out with my friends. No, we're all in a very close vicinity to each other. And so I encourage you all to have conversations in which you are centering people who are being very negatively impacted by this virus. So, it can be very easy to say, I just want this quarantine to be over. Can it just be over by now? Yes, those are valid feelings. We all feel that way. But how can we reorient these conversations to have a depth to them that kind of allows us to express our empathy and allows us to open up for deeper conversations, right? And the third thing that I would talk about is actually just moving back to centering the most oppressed people in your conversations. It is an election year. There's a lot going on in the world besides this quarantine, and there was a lot going on before the quarantine. And so recentering that as well. So you're seeing all these social implications happen as a result of coronavirus. How does that shift the attitudes or the feelings you have about politics and policies? How does that shift the attitude that you have about people who are running for office? So, if universal healthcare now suddenly is something you care about, what do different candidates say about the issues that you care about? And it is in times of trial and tribulation and challenge that we figure out how we feel about those that care for us or claim to care for us, right? So if someone is saying, I'm going to promise you all of these different things, how does that look like in a world of COVID-19? How does that look like when you're seeing incarcerated folks? Will you vote for someone that, encourages us to lock people up and lock more people up? Or are you voting for someone who is encouraging the opposite, for us to close down our jails and for us to really think about rehabilitation in a better way, if that makes sense? So I encourage you guys to continue to have those conversations. And also, I would say, email me if you'd like to get more involved in what specifically we're working on. There's actually a bill being passed through the Massachusetts State House directly talking about decarceration. And so if you'd like to sign on, I'm going to link that below, encourage your parents, your friends, if you can't sign on, for whatever reason. That is something that is very direct that you can do. Just reading through my notes. And then the final thing that I would say is donations to folks who are working on a lot of these issues. I work in the nonprofit world for civil rights work. Our jobs have not stopped. We are still working. We are still working on the missions that our organizations call upon us to do, right? So that is something that I want us to think about, is, what are the organizations that are working on a lot of these issues that you can be supporting? And I have 3 examples for all 3 sort of groups of people that I've talked about so far. For the Asian American community, there's this amazing nonprofit. It's local, Boston-based, the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. They are an organization that is very much like CARE in a lot of ways, but for the Asian American community. And so their website is bcnc.net. I'm going to share this in the chat just so I don't forget for folks. And I'll go ahead and read what they do, their mission statement. So the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center empowers Asians and new immigrants to build healthy families, achieve greater economic success, and contribute to thriving communities by providing a broad range of innovative and family-centered programs and services to more than 13,000 children, youth, and adults every year. The mission of the BCNC is to ensure that the children, youth, and families we serve have the resources and support that they need to achieve greater economic success and social well-being. So social well-being, what is that? They have a lot on their plate right now, if you really think about it. What does it mean to ensure social well-being for Asian Americans when it feels like almost the entire world is in a state where they are placing a lot of blame? And what does that look like? As Muslims, we can relate to that. As a Muslim, I can relate to that, right? Deciding to wear a hijab after 9/11, what has that meant for so many of us? We know what that feels like. And so it is about coming together as a community and about making sure that we are not sort of playing into that trap that Shaitan lays for us, where we are placing that kind of blame on another person. So that's the first organization that I would encourage folks to think about supporting or look into. If you cannot donate money, which is totally valid, look into volunteer opportunities. You know, if you're one of my Muslim Youth Leadership Program young people, like, you know that one thing we care a lot about is folks who like having our young people volunteer for different organizations and to tap into a lot of that stuff. You know, we encourage that a lot. So reach out to them, introduce yourself, be like, hey, how can I help? What can I do right now that you would need from me? So that's the first thing. The second group that I would talk about, so for incarcerated folks, one of my favorite organizations that's working on comprehensive criminal justice reform is called the Equal Justice Initiative. And so their website, I will post right now. EJI.org. So EJI.org, okay, I see a question. Awesome. Brother Abdullah. Yeah, the people who are incarcerated, if they are let go, they would struggle more because they won't be able to work. So what's the point? That's a great question. So there is a huge effort to sort of undo a lot of the stigma around people who have been incarcerated and a lot of the laws that are in place that prevent incarcerated people from going to work. So it is important that we pass legislation that is fully comprehensive, that attacks this issue at all sides, that not only helps people become free from prisons, but rehabilitates folks and places folks in a place where they can actually contribute to society and they can resume their life and move on from whatever it is that we have decided as a society to lock them up for. And so, you know, I encourage you to look into that. You know, there are people who have come up with answers to that question. I do not claim to be an expert on decarceration. However, I will point you to this website that has a lot of information on it. EJI.org. The Equal Justice Initiative is committed to ending mass incarceration and excessive punishment in the United States, to challenging racial and economic injustice, and to promoting basic human rights for the most vulnerable people in American society. This is straight from their website. And there's a lot that they do. I would encourage you guys to look into them. Also, the founder of EJI is someone that I actually have met in person. There's a new Michael B. Jordan movie called Just Mercy. If you can find a way to stream it or something, that might be a good quarantine movie to watch with your family. It is about the founder of EJI, his journey, why he decided to do a lot of his work with incarcerated folks. I haven't seen it myself, so I'm just putting it out there because I've done research on EJI. I've done research on their founder, Brian Stevenson, who wrote the book Just Mercy. So please look into that. And then Brother Darren here, yeah, 13th on Netflix, also very informative as well. Definitely recommend it. If you're one of my MYLP kids, you know that we watch it every year. And that's an amazing one as well to definitely watch with your family. Thank you, Brother Darren. The third sort of resource that I'll put out there is called feedingamerica.org. So this is for folks who are homeless, who might be struggling to sort of get food, which is a very real anxiety that a lot of families in America actually have. A large portion of American families face food insecurity. And so you can imagine with this quarantine, you know, where are folks really turning to get food? I would encourage you to look at feedingamerica.org. And their mission statement is Feeding America is a nationwide organization that harnesses support from local communities to the federal government to keep low-income families supplied with food. Right now, its biggest concern is children whose schools have closed, cutting off a source of healthy, free meals. Feeding America has also has a running list of food banks across the country if you'd like to donate closer to home. So, you know, like we know, schools are closed. And, as someone who is a former youth worker, I used to do one-on-one youth work in Massachusetts. And we had a number of young people that we knew who, if school was closed, they weren't going to get food. And that is a reality. Alhamdulillah, many of the families I know, myself, many of my friends, we don't deal with food insecurity. So it might not be something that you are actually even aware of unless you know someone who's dealing with it. It's easy to think that the rest of the world has exactly the things that you have. And that's just not true. We have certain privileges. If you are getting a meal tonight in an hour, after Maghrib, like, you actually comprise of a very special and privileged group of people. And there are definitely families out there that will be struggling because schools are closed, and because folks are getting laid off, because, they can't leave their house. So please be mindful of that. Definitely log on to this website. It's 6:34. I'll leave like 10-ish minutes or so for Q&A. The last thing that I will say is this quarantine is never going to come back, inshallah. This time that we have to be at home is something that we can really use, right? We can use it for a lot of different things. And I know that people are saying this. People are saying, use this time to become a better person. Use this time to, develop a workout routine, or do, work on the art that you've been putting off. And all of those things need to happen. They definitely need to happen. And while we do that, let's start imagining, let's start dreaming, let's start thinking about the society that we want to create, right? Like, what is the society that we can imagine ourselves having? What does that look like? And what can be done now in this moment to set us up for that, right? And I'll end off with a Quran ayah. Indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. And so thinking a lot about our responsibility as, Muslims, what are we called here to do? And if we have privileges, if we are in a place of power, if we have wealth, if we have relationships, we have connections, we have time, we have a quarantine, we have opportunities that have been presented to us, that have been given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are we doing with that? And what will we have to answer for? What are the different things that we've looked away from? What are the WhatsApp forwards that we have shared, knowing deep down, like, oh, maybe that's not right. Maybe, maybe this is a generalization. Maybe this is something that, and Allahu alam, like, what if it is something that is just, maybe it is futile. There is no point in making a remark like this or a comment like this, something that would be hurtful. How are we thinking about those things and thinking deeply about what we will have to answer for on the Day of Judgment? And so with that, have like 8 minutes. I'm going to open up for Q&A. I'm also going to post the link to the piece of legislation that you can sign on to hopefully give incarcerated folks some relief in this time of coronavirus. Again, it's a comprehensive bill, and so it is something that I think is useful. I'm going to go ahead and find that. I had it open, but I closed it on accident. This Zoom stuff is complicated, guys. It's hard. And I feel like when we all get into the hang of it, it'll become really, once we get into the hang of it, it's going to be like over. Coronavirus will disappear and I will no longer need my Zoom expertise. Okay, so I posted the link to the piece of legislation, and I'm just gonna read some of the information on there. So it's from the actionnetwork.org. Take action, what a progressive response to COVID-19 looks like. Passing HD 4935, so that means it's in the House. And it is Representative Connolly and Representative Honan. And this is an act for providing a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures during the COVID-19 emergency. This is like families who are on the brink of foreclosures, stopping those foreclosures so people are not left homeless. That is something that is obviously very important. There's a bunch of other ones. Paid sick time, that's incredibly important. You know, many of us might come from, again, very privileged families where we don't have to worry about those things. Maybe we're continuing to get paid, and alhamdulillah, I hope that continues to happen. But that is not the case for everyone. You know, many people are getting laid off. Many people are losing their livelihoods, and many people are getting sick. And so folks who are getting sick, you know, they should not be punished for that. You know, I feel like the sickness is punishment enough. So just thinking a lot about that. Oh, I can share the screen. I have 5 minutes left, so it's okay. And let's see. Can people copy and paste that link maybe to actionnetwork.org that I posted? If folks can see that, and just go ahead and click on it. That would be great. There's a question on here about India. Can you talk about conditions in a country like India? Yeah, I mean, I don't claim to be an expert on international matters. Like, CARE is an American-based organization. We work on American issues, which do impact issues all over the world. But what I will say about, you know, a country like India, I think that folks are going to also be in a lot of trouble, of course, like just like any place across the world. But certain countries do lack the infrastructure to be able to support those that are most in need. And so remember to keep people from all over the world in your duas. Remember to pray for folks. Remember to reach out to folks if you have family back home, you know, seeing what it is that folks need. Encouraging social distancing if that is possible. That is something that is important. All right, I have 4 minutes left. Just looking through to see if I missed any questions. Checking on senior neighbors and their well-being. Yep. So, I mean, there's a reason I didn't talk about senior folks and immune-compromised folks. This is my personal opinion. I feel like I've heard a lot about it, and I hope that people are taking seriously the advocacy of the elderly. If you're not, I'm going to take this moment to let you know that you should. You know, older folks are like unequivocally going to be the ones who are hit the hardest. And we should all know that at this point. My purpose in highlighting Asian Americans, incarcerated folks, and homeless folks is that it's something we don't think about, right? It's a part of our society that we are just like, I guess, like in the middle of all of this, we're not really thinking about it. And I want us to figure out how we can begin to think about people who are in situations that might look very different from ours. You know, if we don't identify as Asian American, maybe we are not thinking of the Asian American community, which is also part of the Muslim community, right? Like all three of these groups, Muslims are also Asian. Muslims are also incarcerated. Muslims are also homeless. There are Muslims in every three category. And that doesn't mean, you know, there needs to be a Muslim for us to care about them. No, we should be caring about, you know, the rest of humanity. And so that was sort of my purpose in not spending too much time on senior neighbors, but yes, please check on your senior neighbors. More questions. I have 2 more minutes. I guess I'll sort of end, unless anyone has any questions, I'll end off with my contact information. So like I said, I work full-time for CARE. You can always reach out with any kind of questions or concerns or comments you might have. My email address is Zama, S for Sumaiya, Zama @care.com. And I've posted it into the chat. We'll also leave my work number. If you can call during work hours, feel free to. And that's also in the chat. I'm doing a lot of work on social media. So if you are a young person who would like to submit a TikTok to CARE, please reach out to me and we can make that happen. We have our own TikTok account. We also have our own Instagram account that I'll plug. So the handle is, just gonna double check, CAREMA. CAIRMA, all one word. So go ahead and give us a follow. Reach out to me. I run that account, so feel free to reach out with any ideas you have. I'm trying to take this quarantine time to really fill that account and make it, inshallah, very busy. All right, jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope you have an amazing evening, and inshallah, please feel free to reach out if you need anything.
Thank you, Sister Sumaiya, for taking your time out and giving us valuable information. Jazakallah khair. We'll be starting our evening adhkar with Imam Abdul Rahman in a couple of minutes, inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.